Thank you for will work and learn, play, and live. My name is Nanaimo First Nation, Executive Director of Kw'umut Lelum Child Family Services, elected council member at my home here in Nanaimo for 20 years. Holy smokes, getting old and gray. But anyways, it is what it is. I'm blind because I can barely see the screen. But good afternoon, everyone. The subject I'm going to share with on behalf of the directors today is an amendment for an Indigenous director. And this conversation has been, for those that may not be aware, as being at least 20-year-old conversation. But I'll go in sync and not try to get too far out of order here. Sorry, guys, my eyes are getting awesome. All right. So MCFD is working on a new CFCSA amendment in order to ensure alignment with an act representing First Nation, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families, supports nations moving forward in jurisdictional planning, and addresses practice barriers resulting from the existing legislation. MCFD has requested input from ICFSD, which is this group. The Secretariat has begun hosting circles with directors and agency staff to discuss sticking points with the CFCSA. Preliminary recommendations are to create a new role, Indigenous Director of Child Protection. Additional recommendations will be forthcoming, but this is the most urgent. As I just noted earlier, this is going back more than 20 years. Directors submitted a detailed proposal in 2001. An option paper was developed in 2005. And request reiterated in 2007 in the 21 outstanding issues document. So the dual role of the Indigenous Director. The hope is to breathe life into inherent jurisdiction and responsibility of Indigenous nations to make decisions regarding their children and families. Ensure that all Indigenous children and families in BC receive substantively equal services that are culturally safe and distinct base. My sidebar, and obvious note is obviously everyone on this call knows that that is not happening today. Off script, but being factual. Delegation was always intended as interim measure. Absolutely. Indigenous Director is also intended as an interim measure as nations resume jurisdiction. This measure must be designed to support the transition to jurisdiction. The Indigenous Director brings a vision of Indigenous children and family services that empowers the family and the community to care for their children, extensive knowledge of Indigenous histories, experiences, and realities in BC, capacity to interpret and administer the role according to the traditional values and principles. The Indigenous Director works collaboratively, involves Indigenous communities in establishing strategic priorities and decision-making related to Indigenous children and families, seeks guidance from knowledgeable and experienced service providers, and recognizes ICFS agencies as service delivery partners. The scope of responsibility. Sorry. Children and families served by MCFD and ICFS agencies providing services under the CFCSA. Not, I gotta reiterate, not responsible for children and families served by IGBs under their own laws. Areas of responsibility. Governance. Support Indigenous nations in resuming jurisdiction. Work with ICFS agencies for a smooth transition from service under the CFCSA to service under Indigenous laws. Collaborate with Indigenous people and service providers in planning, development, and implementation and maintenance of Indigenous child and family services. Operations. Ensure that policy, procedures, and standards are aligned with 1, values, cultural concepts, realities of Indigenous communities in BC. 2, CFCSA, Act respecting FNMI children, youth and families, DRIPA. Designate ICFSDs to delegate staff to provide services. Support ICFS agencies in developing standards and policies that start from a traditional place. Work with ISK and service delivery partners to ensure alignment between federal and provincial legislation, policy, and funding. Practice. Ensure Indigenous children and family services are prevention-focused, community-based, culturally appropriate, meet the needs of Indigenous communities, families, and children. Appropriate training is available in a timely manner, and promote community-based capacity building. Shared responsibility and decision-making. Create, through regulations, 2 tables to advise the Indigenous Director. First, planning table composed of Indigenous leadership and ICFS service providers. Second one, practice table composed of ICF service delivery experts. So that's just a beginning conversation, much more than beginning, but just to get food for thought, conversation stimulate of the long overdue need and request of an Indigenous Director. So that's the end of my presentation. Wasn't nearly as long as Adam's and well delivered as Adam's, but here we are. Any comments or questions, folks?
I have one. Bill, how did you get your presentation so short?
Maybe being short myself, that had something to do with it.
Are there any other questions or comments? Short or tall?
This is Chief Wilson. Could I just get a copy to review? I'd have to meet with Yvonne here at our delegated agency and then with our community about that. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chief. Heitzka. So from the feds and the province in the room, I can't see because it's too small there. I'm going to take the silence as of acceptance.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
That's totally the MO, right? Let's do it. That was going to be my question. So, and I like Bill, thanks for your presentation, Bill. Right? Well,
Thank you.
That this has been on the table for as long as I've been coming to these meetings for 15 years. And it's a very beautiful picture up there with diagram. So I'm just wondering, like, and this work is really important, but I'm wondering, you know, is this a request for the amendment or is like, what is this? Like, it's a request for an amendment to the legislation to have it there. And then what happens from here? Like, it was a very great presentation. But like, and I hear Chief Cookby Wilson saying she needs to bring it back to her agency there in community, but what are the next steps?
I can't speak for everyone, but I think first of all, if there's agreements, there should be an Indigenous Director, and then those nuances get worked out. I don't even know if we're even that far, but I'll leave to someone smarter on the call or room. Bart?
Yeah, go ahead.